Queen Rithara stood before the tall mirror in her private chamber and watched her daughter get ready. Velithra sat still, while the servants braided her long silver hair and placed thin chains of white crystal along her forehead. Her skin was smooth and pale like moonlight, and beneath it, violet veins glowed softly with every beat of her heart. She was beautiful. She was terrifying. And today, for the 7th time, she would stand before the galaxy and wait for someone to choose her. No one ever did. The grand spire of Ethelon floated in the dead center of neutral space, far from any empire or dominion. It was an enormous station shaped like a needle of glass and light, and every stellar cycle, the rulers of the 12 thrones gathered there to make alliances, settle disputes, and present their unmarried heirs in a ceremony called the Offering. And, for the Selkon royal family, it had become a wound that opened fresh every single time. Rithara adjusted the golden collar around her own neck and tried to keep her hands from shaking. She had ruled the Selkon dominion for over 100 years. She had led fleets into battle. She had signed treaties that shaped the borders of space itself. But nothing in all her long life hurt as much as watching her only daughter stand on that platform alone. Velithra's condition was rare, 1 in a billion, the doctors said. Her bioluminescent blood, the same blood that flowed through every Selkani, had mutated into something dangerous. A single drop of it on the skin of almost any known species caused violent allergic reactions. Prolonged contact could kill. It was not her fault. It was not something she chose. But it made her untouchable in every way that mattered. The nobles of the galaxy had a name for her. They called her the Poison Princess. "You do not have to do this again," Rithara said softly. Velithra looked at her mother through the mirror. Her violet eyes were calm and flat, like a frozen lake. "Yes, I do," she said. "If I stop showing up, they win." The queen said nothing more. She simply reached out and touched her daughter's shoulder, careful and gentle, the way she had touched her since the day the doctors explained what Velithra's blood could do. The great hall of the spire was already full when they arrived. Thousands of delegates filled the curved rows of seats that rose high above the central platform. There were the Kethrani, with their clicking mandibles and shining black shells. There were the Torvon, massive and gray-skinned, sitting in reinforced chairs. There were the Lissari, who moved like water, and the Dramathi, who smelled of copper and smoke. And among them, sitting in a small section near the back, with no special flags or banners, was a group of humans. Captain James Aldrich Morrow leaned forward in his seat and watched the ceremony with quiet interest. He was 34 years old, tall and lean, with dark hair cut short, and a face that carried the kind of tired calm that came from years of difficult service. He wore the dark blue uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, and he had been sent to the summit as an observer. Humanity had no throne, they had no vote. They were new to the galactic stage, and most species treated them the way older children treat the youngest kid at the table, with polite disinterest. Morrow did not mind. He had learned long ago that the people who talked the least often saw the most. The offering began. One by one, the heirs of the great houses stepped onto the crystal platform in the center of the hall. Each time, representatives from other houses would rise and speak the formal words of acceptance, declaring their intent to bond their families together. It was a careful dance of power and strategy. Every match was political. Every bond was a treaty written in blood. Morrow watched 6 heirs get chosen, some quickly, some after tense pauses. The crowd murmured and clapped and whispered behind their hands. Then Velithra stepped onto the platform. The hall went quiet, not the respectful quiet that had greeted the other heirs. This was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a room full of people looking away. Morrow saw delegates suddenly find great interest in their datapads. He saw ambassadors lean over and whisper to their aides. He saw the Kethrani representative, a tall insectoid named Vortal, watching with his head tilted and his dark eyes shining with something that looked like amusement. Veilithra stood perfectly still on the platform. The light hit her silver skin and made the violet glow beneath it pulse gently. She held her chin high. Her hands were at her sides, and they did not shake. She looked like a statue carved from starlight and sadness. The seconds passed. 5, 10, 20. The arbiter at the edge of the platform shifted uncomfortably. By tradition, he had to wait a full minute before declaring an offering void. In the royal balcony above, Queen Rithara gripped the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. Her advisor, an old Selkani named Thesson, stood beside her and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. They had been through this 6 times before. They knew how it ended. A tear slipped down the queen's silver cheek. She did not wipe it away. She leaned close to Thesson and whispered the words that she had carried inside her like a stone for years. No one will choose my daughter. 45 seconds. The arbiter raised his staff to signal the void. And then a chair scraped against the floor in the back of the hall. Every head turned. Every eye shifted. Captain James Morrow stood up from the human section and straightened his uniform. His face was calm. His eyes were steady. He looked at the platform where Veilithra stood alone, and something moved inside him that he could not fully explain. He had seen that look before. He had seen it on the face of someone he loved a long time ago. The look of someone the world had decided to leave behind. He stepped into the aisle and began to walk. The murmurs started immediately. A human, a species with no throne, no title, no standing. The Torvon delegate actually laughed. The Lissari exchanged confused glances. Vortal's mandibles clicked slowly as he leaned forward. Morrow walked the entire length of the aisle without looking left or right. He climbed the 3 steps to the platform and stood before Veilithra. She stared at him with wide violet eyes, her lips slightly parted, her carefully built wall of composure cracking for the first time in years. He spoke the ancient words clearly and without hesitation. He had memorized them that morning, just in case, because some part of him had known he would need them. I see you, I choose you, I stand with you. The hall erupted, shouts, gasps, arguments breaking out in a dozen languages. The arbiter looked like he might faint, but Morrow did not look at any of them. He looked only at Veilithra. And Veilithra, for the first time in 7 long years, looked back at someone who had not turned away. High in the shadows of the upper gallery, Ambassador Vortal watched the chaos below, and slowly rubbed his forelimbs together. His dark eyes glittered. A human, he said quietly to his aide. How very amusing. This changes nothing. It only changes the way the Selkhan fall. The Selkhan throne world of Dalveira was nothing like Earth. The forests were made of crystal. The trees grew tall and thin, with branches that rang like bells when the wind touched them. The oceans glowed at night with soft blue and violet light, and the sky had 2 moons that hung close enough to see the mountains on their surfaces. It was beautiful in a way that made the chest ache, and James Morrow stood on the balcony of his guest room in the royal palace and wondered what on earth he had gotten himself into. 3 days had passed since the offering. 3 days since he had walked down that aisle and spoken words that shook the entire galactic order. The Terran Admiralty had sent him 17 messages. 14 of them were angry. The other 3 were confused. He had answered none of them yet. A knock came at his door, hard and sharp. He opened it and found Princess Veilithra standing in the corridor. She was alone. She wore no crown, No ceremonial dress. Just a simple dark tunic that made the violet glow of her veins stand out even brighter against her silver skin. Her arms were crossed, and her eyes burned with cold fire. "We need to talk," she said. She did not wait for an invitation. She walked past him into the room and turned to face him with the look of someone who had been holding in a storm for 3 days and had finally decided to let it out. "Why did you do it?" she asked. Morrow closed the door and leaned against it. "I told you at the ceremony. I see you. I choose you. I stand." "Do not repeat those words to me," she said sharply. "Those are ritual words. They mean nothing without reason behind them. So I am asking you, human, why?" He looked at her for a long moment. She was taller than him by a full head. Her eyes were bright and hard, and behind the anger in them, there was something much more fragile. Something she was trying very hard to hide. "Because I have seen what it looks like when everyone in the room decides someone is not worth their time," he said quietly. "And I did not like seeing it happen to you." She stared at him. Then she shook her head and turned toward the window. "You are a fool," she said. "The bonding trials will kill you. You know this, yes? My blood is toxic to nearly every living species. The last person who attempted the trial of endurance spent 6 weeks in a medical chamber and lost the use of his left arm. The one before that died. I know, and you do not care?" "I did not say I do not care. I said I know." She looked back at him over her shoulder. For a moment, just a flash, the hardness left her face. Then it returned. "My mother wishes to speak with you," she said. "Try not to embarrass yourself." She left without another word. Queen Rithara received him in a garden at the heart of the palace. The plants here were alive, not crystal, and they bent toward Morrow as he walked past, as though they were curious about the strange warm-blooded creature in their midst. The queen sat on a stone bench beside a pool of glowing water and watched him approach with the careful eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime reading people. "Sit," she said. He sat. "Captain Morrow," she began, "I will not waste your time with pleasantries. My daughter's life has been defined by rejection. Every cycle, she stands on that platform, and every cycle the galaxy tells her she is not wanted. You stepped forward and gave her something she has not had in 7 years. Hope." She paused. "If you are not serious, I need you to tell me now, before the trials begin, because hope, when it is taken away, is crueler than rejection ever was." Morrow met her gaze. "I am serious, Your Majesty." "Are you prepared to die?" "But yes." She studied him for a long time. Then she nodded slowly. "The first trial begins tomorrow. The trial of understanding. You must demonstrate knowledge of our history, our language, and our customs. You have 1 night to prepare." 1 night? The galaxy does not wait for humans to catch up, Captain. That night, Morrow sat in the palace library, surrounded by holographic texts in the Selkani language, and tried to absorb 1,000 years of alien culture in 12 hours. He was failing. The grammar alone had 600 tenses. The history involved wars between houses whose names he could not pronounce. He was about to give up, when the library door opened and Velithra walked in, carrying a tray of food. "You have the pronunciation of a drunk child," she said, setting the tray down. "I know. And your understanding of the Third Dynasty is completely wrong." "I also know that." She sat down across from him and pulled one of the holographic texts toward her. "The Third Dynasty did not fall because of war," she said. "It fell because the queen at the time refused to ask for help when she needed it. She thought asking was weakness." She looked at him. It was not. He understood. "Will you help me?" Something changed in her face, just slightly. The sharp edges softened by a fraction. "Yes," she said. They studied together until the 2 moons set, and the sky turned the color of dark wine. Somewhere between the Fourth Dynasty and the proper conjugation of the Selkani word for honor, The silence between them stopped being uncomfortable and started being something else, something warm. Near dawn, Velithra asked him a question that had clearly been sitting inside her all night. "You said you knew what it looked like when everyone leaves the room. What did you mean?" Morrow was quiet for a moment. "My wife," he said. "Back on Earth. She was sick for a long time. A disease that the doctors could slow down, but not stop. At first, everyone came to visit. Friends, family, neighbors. But as the months went on and she got worse, the visits stopped. People did not know what to say, so they said nothing. They did not know what to do, so they did nothing. By the end, it was just me and her in a quiet house, and a world that had moved on." He looked at his hands. "She died on a Tuesday morning. It was raining, and I remember thinking that the worst part was not losing her. The worst part was watching everyone decide she was too difficult to love." Velithra said nothing for a long time. When Morrow finally looked up, he saw that her violet eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. "I am sorry," she said softly. "So am I." They sat in silence as the first light of dawn crept through the crystal windows. It was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who recognized something in each other that did not need words. The trial of understanding took place that afternoon in the great throne room. The questions were asked by a panel of Selkani elders, and they were hard. But Morrow answered them with a steadiness that surprised the court. He made mistakes. His pronunciation was rough. But he spoke with respect and genuine feeling, and when he recited the ancient vow of the Selkani warrior class, he did it looking directly at Velithra. He passed. Barely, but he passed. The court murmured. The queen allowed herself a small, careful smile. But far from Dalvera, aboard a sleek black warship, Ambassador Vortal was not smiling. He stood before a holographic map of Selkani space, and traced the hyperspace corridor that ran through the center of it with one sharp claw. That corridor was the most valuable trade route in the quadrant, and as long as the Selkan held it, Vortal's plans meant nothing. He turned to his aide. "File a petition with the Concord. Argue that the human has no legal standing to participate in the offering. No throne, no bond. Simple." "And if the petition fails, Ambassador?" Vortal's mandibles spread wide in what passed for a smile among the Kithrani. "Then we stop being polite." Meanwhile, aboard the Terran diplomatic ship orbiting Dalvera, Dr. Lena Vasquez was staring at a microscope display with her mouth open. She had spent 3 days analyzing samples of Velithra's blood alongside Selkani scientists, and what she was seeing did not make sense. Human cells exposed to the toxic compound in the blood did not die. They fought. They adapted. They wrapped around the foreign molecules like they were trying to learn them. She ran the test 3 more times and got the same result. She picked up her communicator. "Captain Morrow, you need to come see this. I think I know why you might actually survive the next trial. And honestly, it is the most human thing I have ever seen." The sanctum of proving was buried deep beneath the capital city of Dalvera, carved into the living rock 1,000 years before humans had learned to build fire. The walls were lined with crystal that pulsed with a slow violet heartbeat, as if the planet itself was alive and watching. The air was cool and thin and smelled of iron and old stone. Torches of bioluminescent flame floated in alcoves along the corridor, casting long purple shadows on the floor. Morrow walked the ancient path toward the trial chamber and tried to steady his breathing. Dr. Vasquez had explained what she had found. Human cells had a natural resistance to the toxic compound in Velithra's blood. Not full immunity, but something close. Something that no other species in the known galaxy possessed. It was a freak of evolution, an accident of biology. Human immune systems were stubborn and aggressive and endlessly adaptable. and that stubbornness might be enough to keep him alive. That was the word Vasquez had used. Might. The chamber was round and wide with a domed ceiling, carved with the faces of ancient Selkani warriors. In the center stood a stone altar with 2 shallow grooves cut into its surface. The court had gathered in a ring around the edges. The queen stood at the front, her face like a mask. Beside her, the elders held their staffs and waited. And Velithra stood opposite the altar, dressed in the white ceremonial robe of the Selkani royal line, her silver skin glowing brighter than Moro had ever seen it. She was afraid. She hid it well, but he could see it in the way she held her hands, fingers pressed tight together, knuckles sharp. The elder priest stepped forward and spoke in a voice that echoed off the stone walls. The trial of endurance tests the bond between blood and blood. The suitor will receive the mark of the Selkan. If his body rejects the blood, the bond is void. If his body accepts it, the bond moves forward. He looked at Moro with ancient violet eyes. If his body fails completely, he will die in this chamber. Do you understand, human? I understand, Moro said. The priest nodded and held up a ceremonial blade. It was thin and curved and made of the same crystal as the trees above. It caught the torchlight and threw violet sparks across the walls. Velithra stepped to the altar. Moro stepped to the other side. They faced each other across the stone surface. She held out her left arm, and the priest drew the blade across her wrist. Her blood welled up, bright and glowing, violet and beautiful and deadly. It pooled in the groove carved into the altar and flowed slowly toward the center. Then the priest cut Moro's arm. The pain was sharp and clean. His red blood ran into the second groove and moved to meet hers at the center of the altar. When the 2 streams touched, the reaction was immediate. Fire ran up Moro's arm. Not real fire, but it felt like it. Every nerve from his wrist to his shoulder screamed at once. His veins lit up beneath his skin, glowing faint violet as the compound entered his bloodstream. He gripped the edge of the altar with his free hand and locked his jaw shut. He would not scream. He would not fall. Not here. Not in front of her. His vision blurred. The chamber tilted sideways. He could hear the court gasping, could hear the elder priest murmuring prayers, could hear somewhere far away the queen whispering something he could not make out. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his teeth. The compound moved through him like a living thing, testing him, pushing against his cells, trying to break them apart, and his cells pushed back. Just as Vasquez had predicted, his immune system did not surrender. It grabbed hold of the foreign molecules and wrestled them into submission, one by one, cell by cell, like a brawl happening inside every vein in his body. Moro dropped to one knee. Violet light pulsed under his skin in waves. Sweat ran down his face, and his hands shook violently. He could feel his body fighting a war at the microscopic level, and he was caught in the middle of it, a bystander in his own blood. 30 seconds passed. A minute. 2 minutes. The glow began to fade. His breathing steadied. The fire in his arm cooled to a deep ache. He looked down at his hands and saw that the veins in his left arm were still faintly violet, thin lines of alien light beneath human skin. He was alive. The chamber was completely silent. Then the elder priest stepped forward and examined Moro's arm with trembling hands. He touched the glowing veins. He checked Moro's pulse. Then he turned to the court and spoke one word in Selkani that Moro had learned just 3 nights ago. Accepted. The court erupted, not with cheers exactly, but with the stunned noise of people who had just watched the impossible happen. In 1,000 years of the bonding trials, no outsider had ever survived the trial of endurance. The last 3 who tried were carried out on stretchers. 2 of them never woke up. But the human was alive, scarred, shaking, and glowing faintly violet along one arm, but alive. Velithra moved before anyone could stop her. She came around the altar and knelt beside him. Her hands hovered near his shoulders, wanting to touch him, but afraid to. Her eyes were bright and wet, and her voice cracked when she spoke. "You impossible, stubborn, ridiculous creature," she whispered. Morrow looked up at her and managed a weak smile. "Is that a compliment, in Selkani?" It was small and broken, and it was the most honest sound anyone in that chamber had ever heard from the Poison Princess. In the days that followed, everything changed. Morrow recovered slowly in the palace medical wing, while Vasquez and the Selkani scientists studied what was happening inside his body. The results were remarkable. His cells were not simply resisting the compound anymore. They were adapting to it, learning it, integrating it. The violet glow in his veins did not fade. If anything, it grew slightly brighter. "His biology is doing something I have never seen," Vasquez told the Queen. "It is not rejecting the compound or fighting it anymore. It is making it part of itself. Given enough time, the compound will not just be harmless to him. It will enhance him. Faster reflexes, better healing, maybe more. Humans are adaptable. It is literally what we do best." Meanwhile, Violethra began to show Morrow her world. She took him to the crystal forests, where the trees sang in harmonies that shifted with the seasons. She took him to the edge of the glowing ocean and told him the old stories of her people, about the first Selkani who rose from the bioluminescent waters and looked at the stars and decided to reach for them. She showed him the scars on her own arms, thin silver lines, where she had tried, years ago, to find a way to remove the toxin from her blood. It had not worked. It had only hurt. Morrow sat beside her on the shore and played his guitar. He had brought it from Earth in his travel bag, a battered acoustic instrument that looked absurd on an alien planet. But when he played, Violethra closed her eyes and listened, and the tension left her shoulders for the first time in years. "What is that song?" she asked. "It is called Hallelujah. A man on Earth wrote it a long time ago. It is about broken things that are still beautiful." She opened her eyes and looked at him. "I like it," she said quietly. But peace did not last. Far away, Vortal's petition to the Concord had failed. The legal scholars ruled that the ancient offering laws did not require a throne, only a willing heart. Vortal received the news in silence. Then he opened a secure channel to a fleet of mercenary warships waiting in deep space. "The Selkon throne world," he said. "You have your target. Move when I give the signal." Back on Dalvera, the third and final trial arrived, the trial of worth. Morrow had to face the Queen's champion in single combat to prove he could protect the princess. The champion was a Selkani warrior named Korvath, who stood 7 feet tall and had fought in 3 interstellar wars. He carried a crystal blade, the length of Morrow's entire body, and moved with the smooth speed of something that had been bred for battle. Morrow had a standard Terran combat knife and 10 years of military training. The fight lasted 11 minutes. Korvath was faster, stronger, and more skilled in every measurable way. He knocked Morrow down 4 times. He cut him twice. He broke one of his ribs with a kick that sent Morrow sliding across the stone floor. But Morrow kept getting up. Every time Korvath put him down, the human stood back up, bleeding, limping, grinning. He dodged where he could not block. He used the environment, throwing sand, rolling under strikes, once even grabbing Korvath's own arm, and using the warrior's momentum against him. It was not elegant, it was not graceful, it was messy and desperate and purely stubbornly human. When the time ran out, neither fighter had yielded. The elder priest declared it a draw, which by ancient law counted as a pass. The court roared. Korvath himself looked at Morrow with something close to respect, helped him to his feet, and said in careful, halting English, "You are very hard to kill, human." Morrow wiped the blood from his lip and nodded. "We get that a lot." That night, while Morrow rested and the court celebrated, a Selkani scout ship at the edge of Dominion space detected something on long-range sensors. Ships, dozens of them, moving in a formation that was not commercial and not friendly. Queen Rithara received the report in her war room. Her face hardened. She turned to an aide. "Bring me Captain Morrow." When he arrived, still bruised and bandaged from the trial, she looked at him with eyes that held both gratitude and steel. "You wish to stand with my daughter, Captain," she said. "Now you may have to fight for her. There is a fleet coming. And it is not coming to talk." The war room of the Selkan Palace was carved from a single block of dark crystal, and it hummed with a low vibration that Morrow could feel in his chest. Holographic maps floated in the air above the central table, showing the approach of the mercenary fleet. 47 ships, frigates, destroyers, and 3 heavy cruisers, with enough firepower to crack a planet's orbital defenses. They were moving fast, and they were not hiding. Queen Rithara stood at the head of the table, surrounded by her admirals and generals. Vylithra stood at her mother's right side, her violet eyes locked on the map, already calculating distances and angles in her head. She had been trained for war since she was a child. The galaxy had seen her as a fragile, untouchable thing, but inside the walls of the Selkan Military Academy, she had been one of the finest strategic minds of her generation. Nobody outside the Dominion knew this. Nobody had cared enough to find out. "The fleet will reach our outer defenses in 18 hours, the senior admiral reported. "We can hold the orbital stations for a time, but we are outnumbered. If they break through to the planet, our ground forces will not be enough." "Where did the fleet come from?" Morrow asked. "Unregistered. No house markings, but the ship designs are Kethrani made," the admiral said. "This has Vortal's scent all over it." Morrow looked at the map and felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He had started something at the offering. He had stepped forward because it was the right thing to do. But the right thing had consequences, and those consequences were now 47 warships heading toward the planet of the woman he was beginning to care about more than he had planned. He turned to the Queen. "Your Majesty, I need to contact Earth." "Your people have no fleet large enough to make a difference, Captain." "Maybe not, but we have something else." The subspace communication array in the palace was powerful enough to reach Terran Command in real time. Morrow stood alone in the transmission room and waited as the connection was established. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Admiral Catherine Holt, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes and the permanent expression of someone who had heard every excuse in the book and was not interested in hearing another one. "Captain Morrow," she said flatly, "I have been waiting for your call. The diplomatic community is on fire. Half the Concord thinks you have started a war, and the other half thinks you have lost your mind." "Both might be true, Admiral. I need help." "You need a lot more than help. You need a miracle. Then send me one. There is a fleet heading for Dalvera. Vortal hired them to destroy the Selkan Dominion so he can take their hyperspace corridor. If that corridor falls into Kethrani hands, every trade route humanity depends on goes through hostile space. This is not just about the Selkan. This is about us." Holt was quiet for a moment. "Even if I agreed, Morrow, I cannot send the full fleet. We do not have the political cover, and we do not have the ships. The best I can do is the 7th. 12 ships, mostly frigates, a few destroyers. 12 ships is enough. Enough to win? Enough to matter." Holt studied him through the screen. "You really believe in this, don't you?" Morrow thought about Vylithra standing alone on the platform. He thought about the violet light in her veins, and the sadness in her eyes, and the way she had laughed when he survived the trial, like she had forgotten she was allowed to. "Admiral," he said, "we spent 10,000 years fighting each other because we were afraid of what was different. We came to the stars swearing we would be better. If we turn away now, from people who need us, from the fight that matters, then we did not bring our best selves out here. We brought our worst." The line was silent for a long time. "The Seventh Fleet will depart within the hour," Holt said. "Do not make me regret this, Captain." The connection closed. That night, with the fleet still hours away, Velithra came to find Morrow. She did not knock. She simply appeared in his doorway like a ghost made of silver and light. "Come with me," she said. "There is something I want to show you." She led him through corridors he had never seen, down staircases that spiraled deep into the rock beneath the palace, past doors that opened at the touch of her glowing hand. The air grew warm and humid, and a soft violet light began to fill the passage from somewhere ahead. They emerged into a cavern so vast that Morrow could not see the ceiling. In the center of the cavern was a lake, but it was not water. It was bioluminescent blood, the accumulated blood of 1,000 generations of Selkani royals, pooled here over centuries in a sacred tradition older than the Dominion itself. The lake glowed with such intensity that the entire cavern was bathed in living violet light. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. "This is the heart of Dalvera," Velithra said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The most sacred place in our world. No outsider has ever stood here." The light danced across his face and reflected in his eyes. "Why are you showing me this?" She turned to face him. The glow of the lake made her skin shine like polished silver, and the veins beneath it blazed with light. She looked like something from a dream. "Because tomorrow there will be a battle," she said, "and I do not know what will happen. But I want you to know that no matter what comes, you have already given me something that no one else ever did." She paused, and her voice grew thick. "You made me feel chosen, not despite what I am, but as what I am, and I will carry that with me regardless of whether we survive." Morrow reached out and took her hand. Her skin was warm, almost hot, and the violet light pulsed brighter where they touched. The compound in her blood that had nearly killed him now hummed against his skin like a second heartbeat. His body recognized it. His body welcomed it. "We are going to survive, both of us." She squeezed his hand and said nothing, but she did not let go. The mercenary fleet hit the Selkan outer defenses at dawn. The attack was brutal and fast. Vortal's hired ships came in hard from 3 directions, hammering the orbital stations with concentrated fire. The Selkan warships responded with fierce precision, their crystal-hulled vessels cutting through space like blades. But there were simply too many enemies. The orbital stations began to buckle. Fires bloomed in the dark above Dalvera like terrible flowers. Velithra took command of the defense from her personal warship, the Luminous Edge. She was a different creature in the command chair. Gone was the guarded, wounded princess. In her place was a strategist of terrifying clarity. She read the battlefield like a musician reads a sheet of music, and she directed her fleet with a calm voice that carried absolute authority. But it was not enough. The mercenaries pushed closer. A breach opened in the orbital line, and then the sky changed. 12 points of light appeared at the edge of the system, bright and sudden like new stars being born. The Terran 7th Fleet dropped out of hyperspace in a tight wedge formation, engines burning hot, weapons already powered. They were small compared to the Selkani and mercenary vessels, scrappy, rough-looking, but they came in fast and they came in fighting. The mercenary fleet hesitated. They had not planned for reinforcements. That hesitation cost them 3 ships in the first 90 seconds, as the human frigates tore into the flanks of the enemy formation with a coordinated ferocity that the galaxy had never seen from such a small force. Human tactical doctrine was born from millennia of war on a single planet, an endless, bloody education in the art of fighting with less against more. The Terran captains did not wait for orders. They adapted in real time, each ship finding gaps in the enemy line and exploiting them with ruthless efficiency. They fought the way humans had always fought, not by being the biggest or the strongest, but by being too stubborn and too creative to know when they were supposed to lose. Aboard the orbital station, a mercenary boarding party breached the lower decks. Morrow led a joint defense force of human marines and Selkani warriors to meet them. It was the first time humans and Selkani had ever fought side by side, and something remarkable happened. The two species complemented each other perfectly. The Selkani were fast and precise. The humans were adaptive and relentless. Together, they were devastating. Morrow fought at the front. The compound in his blood, the same compound that was supposed to be a death sentence, responded to the adrenaline and the stress. His reflexes sharpened. His movements quickened. The faint violet glow in his veins blazed brighter. The Selkani warriors fighting beside him saw it, and something shifted in their eyes. This human was not pretending to be one of them. He was becoming something new, something that was both. The boarding party was repelled. The mercenary fleet caught between the Selkani defenders and the Terran wolves tearing at their flanks began to break apart. One by one the mercenary ships turned and ran, disappearing into hyperspace with their hulls scarred and their crews shaken. The battle was over. Dal Vera was safe, but Vortal was not finished. From the Concord chambers far away, he watched the battle reports with cold fury. His mercenaries had failed. His political petition had failed. But he had one move left. He activated his communicator and called for an emergency session of the Concord of 12 Thrones. The charge: unauthorized military intervention by a non-throne species. The target: humanity and the Selkan Dominion. The punishment he demanded: expulsion from the galactic community. The final battle would not be fought with ships and weapons. It would be fought with words. And it would take place in the same hall where everything began. The grand spire of Aethelin looked exactly the same as it had the day Vaelithra stood on the crystal platform and heard nothing but silence. The same curved rows of seats rising high toward the glass ceiling. The same soft white light falling from above like trapped starlight. The same faces from a dozen different species filling the hall with the hum of 1,000 whispered conversations. But everything was different now, and everyone knew it. Captain James Morrow stood at the entrance to the Great Hall and straightened his uniform. The dark blue fabric was clean and pressed, but underneath it, his left arm still carried the faint violet glow of Selkani blood woven into his veins. He could feel it sometimes, a warmth that pulsed with his heartbeat, a reminder that his body had accepted something the entire galaxy said was impossible. Beside him, Vaelithra stood tall in the silver armor of the Selkani Royal Guard. She had refused to wear a ceremonial gown. She was done pretending to be soft for people who had never bothered to see her strength. The armor suited her. It caught the light and turned her into something that looked less like a princess and more like a blade. "Are you ready?" she asked him. "No," he said honestly. She almost smiled. "Good. Neither am I." They walked in together. Ambassador Vortal was already at the center of the hall, standing before the raised platform where the arbiter of the Concord sat. Vortal looked calm. His black insectoid eyes reflected the light without giving anything away, and his mandibles moved in slow, deliberate patterns that the Kethrani used when they were confident. He had spent weeks building his case. He had the support of 3 throne houses. He believed he was going to win. The arbiter called the tribunal to order, and Vortal began. He spoke well. Morrow had to give him that. The ambassador laid out his argument with the precision of a surgeon cutting away diseased tissue. Humanity, he explained, held no throne. They had no standing in the offering. Their acceptance of Princess Vaelithra was therefore illegitimate, a violation of 1,000 years of sacred tradition. And their military intervention at Dalvera was not a rescue, but an act of war, an invasion by a minor species that had overstepped its place in the galactic order. The Concord exists to maintain balance, Vortal said, his voice echoing through the silent hall. If we allow any species, no matter how small or how new, to insert itself into our traditions and our conflicts by force, then the balance is broken. Today it is the humans. Tomorrow it will be another. The Selkon invited chaos into our midst. They must bear the consequences. 3 throne houses applauded. Others murmured in agreement. The hall shifted uncomfortably. Then Queen Rithara stood. She walked to the speaking floor slowly, carrying herself with the weight and grace of someone who had ruled for over a century. She wore no armor and no crown, just a simple silver robe. She looked small down there, alone on the floor of the great hall, surrounded by the towering seats of the 12 thrones. But when she spoke, her voice filled the room. Ambassador Vortal speaks of tradition, she began. He speaks of balance and order and the sacred customs of the offering. So let me speak of tradition as well. Let me speak of what tradition has meant for my daughter. She paused and looked up at the rows of faces above her. 7 times I brought Vaelithra to this hall. 7 times she stood on that platform. 7 times she waited, while every throne in this room looked away. Her voice did not break, but it trembled at the edges. My daughter is not sick. She is not broken. She was born with a condition that makes her blood dangerous to touch. That is all. And for that, for something she did not choose and cannot change, you decided she was worthless. The hall was completely silent. You ask me why I accepted a human for my daughter, she continued. I accepted him because he was the only being in this entire galaxy who looked at her and did not see poison. He saw a person. He saw someone worth standing beside. And if that is a crime, then condemn me. But know what it says about all of you. She returned to her seat. No one spoke for a long moment. Then the arbiter called Morrow to the floor. He walked down the steps to the speaking platform and looked out at the assembled races of the galaxy. Thousands of alien eyes stared back at him. He was one human standing before the rulers of known space, and for a brief, dizzy moment, he felt the full weight of where he was and what he was doing. Then he thought about Vaelithra, standing on this same platform, with no one beside her, and the weight shifted. It became something he could carry. He did not give a grand speech. He did not raise his voice or make dramatic gestures. He spoke the way humans spoke when they meant something, plainly, directly, from the gut. I am not a king, he said. I do not have a throne, or an army, or a bloodline that stretches back 1,000 years. I am a captain in a small fleet, from a young species that most of you did not know existed until a few decades ago. Ambassador Vortal is right about that. We are new here. We are small. He looked at Vortal, but he is wrong about everything else. I stepped forward at the offering because a woman was standing alone, and no one in this room had the courage to stand with her. Not because she was dangerous, because you were afraid. You were afraid of what her blood might do to your bodies, and that fear made you forget that she is a person with a mind and a heart and a right to be loved. The silence deepened. You built a galaxy of thrones, Morrow continued. 12 seats. 12 bloodlines, and anyone who does not fit the pattern gets left on the platform. You did it to Velithra. You have done it to dozens of smaller species who sit in the back rows of this hall right now, with no vote and no voice. We humans have a saying. A chair at the table is not given, it is earned. He paused. You did not offer us a chair, so we built our own, and we brought one for everyone you forgot. The back rows of the hall stirred. The smaller species, the client races, the unrepresented peoples who had attended these summits for generations without ever being asked for their opinion, began to stand. One by one, then in groups, then in waves. They stood in silence and looked down at the 12 thrones with something that had not been in their eyes before. Not anger, recognition. The hall changed in that moment. Everyone felt it. The old order did not crumble. It cracked, and through the cracks, light came in. Vortal saw the shift and moved to salvage his position, but it was too late. Dr. Vasquez and the Selkani Intelligence Service presented their evidence. Intercepted communications between Vortal and the mercenary fleet, financial records showing the payments, tactical data proving that the attack on Dalvera was planned and directed by the Kethrani ambassador himself. The evidence was clear, and it was damning. The hall erupted. Vortal's allies abandoned him in seconds. The 3 throne houses that had supported him suddenly discovered urgent reasons to be elsewhere. The arbiter called for a vote. Vortal was stripped of his seat, his diplomatic status, and his freedom. He was led from the hall in restraints, his mandibles clicking furiously, his dark eyes burning with helpless rage. In the days that followed, the Concord voted on a proposal that Morrow had not expected. A 13th throne, not for humanity alone, but for all the species that had been watching from the back rows. A seat for the forgotten. Humanity was asked to serve as its first steward, not because they were the strongest or the oldest, but because they had been the ones willing to stand up. The bonding ceremony took place 1 week later in the Great Hall, in the same spot where Velithra had once stood alone. The ceremony blended Selkani tradition with human vows. The crystal blade was drawn across both their arms once more, and this time, when their blood met, there was no pain. The violet light flowed through Morrow's veins smoothly, gently, like water finding its path. His body did not fight it. His body knew it now. It was part of him, the same way she was. The hall watched in silence as the glow spread through his arm and settled, a permanent mark of a bond that biology said was impossible, and a human heart said was inevitable. Velithra looked at him across the altar. Her eyes were bright, and for the first time there were no walls behind them, no armor, no distance. Just her, open and whole, and finally seen. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For walking down the aisle." That evening, they stood together on the balcony of the Grand Spire, looking out at the stars. The galaxy spread before them in ribbons of light and dust and distant suns, impossibly vast and impossibly old. Somewhere out there were the crystal forests of Dalvera and the blue oceans of Earth, 2 worlds that had never known each other existed until a man walked down an aisle and spoke 3 sentences to a woman who had stopped believing anyone ever would. Velithra leaned against him. He felt the warmth of her skin and the soft pulse of violet light where their arms touched. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, stepping forward. Morrow put his arm around her and looked out at the stars. "Not for a single second," he said. She closed her eyes. The glow beneath her skin, the thing the galaxy had called a curse and a poison and a reason to look away, burned steady and bright against his side. It did not hurt. It had never really been meant to hurt. It had only been waiting for someone brave enough to reach for it. And finally, after all those years of silence, someone had.